Welcome to the Sur-thrival Guide podcast, a short series of daily impactful episodes full of ideas and tips on how to thrive in survival mode during the corona crisis. Every weekday, with the help of a special guest expert, we'll be exploring different tools to add to your Sur-thrival toolkit. So strap yourselves in and get ready to be inspired as we show you the way to Sur-thrival. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us here on the Sur-thrival Guide podcast. I'm Mark Stabina, former professional rugby player and now leadership consultant with Winning EQ. What does that mean? Well, basically we help individuals and teams achieve excellence and perform better in sports, business and in life. And that's also why I created the Sur-thrival Guide ebook, which is free and yours ready to download. If you haven't done so already, please go to winningeq.com right now or just click the link in the show notes below. And also, please pass on the link as a gift to friends, family, work colleagues, just anybody who could use a little lift and some guidance right now to help navigate through these stressful, uncertain times. And this podcast is a way to bring that ebook to life and expand upon some of the topics that are discussed with the help of some special guest experts. Now, the special guest that we have today and what we are going to discuss is very close to my heart. We have with us Ed Jackson. Now, like me, Ed is a former professional rugby player. Also like me, Ed suffered a serious neck injury that ended his career prematurely. Unlike me, Ed became a quadriplegic and was told that he would never walk again. He has not only defied the odds, got back on his feet, and indeed is walking again, but what he has accomplished and what he strives to accomplish since his injury is nothing short of inspirational and extraordinary. I'm really excited to talk about and share with you some of his experiences and what he's up to and what he's planning next. So let's not wait anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce, all the way from the UK, Ed Jackson. Ed, mate, welcome, and given your recent accomplishment, which we'll talk about in a moment, I'm sure you're inundated with podcasts, interview, guests, appearances, TV, radio, so we really appreciate that you've given your time to us today, buddy.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
So, Ed, that was a very short intro. If you could you please give the audience a little bit more of a background, like a cheat sheet version of the Ed Jackson story, where you've come from and how you ended up where you are today?
So I am born in the southwest of England in a place called Bath, which is where I am right now. And I was fortunate enough, like yourself, to go into a career as playing professional rugby, effectively as a 19-year-old kid doing PE for a living for the rest of your life. So that's also you think it is, and that's great. And I played for 10 years in the UK, Bath, Wasps, London Welsh, and then went over to play in Wales for the Dragons, which of course, Mark, you played for as well. And in 2017, so 3 years ago, I was recovering from a shoulder injury. So I went back to my parents' house for the weekend. We went round to our family friend's house, sort of first hot day of the year, and I went down to the swimming pool. It was a feature pool, probably a lot like a lot of the pools you have in LA actually. Not so common over here, but there was a rock face in one side and a waterfall in one end, and I dived in where the waterfall hit the water. And of course, the water was disturbed, so I couldn't really see the bottom, and I just misjudged it, and it was a lot shallower than I thought. So I thought it was probably, I don't know, I thought it was a deep end, so I thought 6 to 8 feet. It was only about 3 feet deep. So smacked my head on the bottom of the pool, hit my head pretty hard. You know, I'd sort of been hitting my head for a living for the last 10 years playing professional rugby, but I hadn't had a whack like that for a long time. But I didn't lose consciousness. I went to stand up to see if I was bleeding from the top of my head, and it was when I tried to stand up that I quite quickly realized that something was wrong because I couldn't move. So I was underwater looking at the surface. First of all, I was confused because normally you tell your body to move and it moves, and now it wasn't. But quite quickly that sort of confusion turned to panic because I was like, oh shit, I could drown here. And fortunately, my dad was in the pool and one of my mates, and they pulled me to the surface and held me steady in the pool. My dad's a retired doctor, which again was lucky. So they didn't try and drag me out the pool. He assumed something must be wrong with my head or my spinal cord, and he was right. I dislocated C6 and C7 vertebrae at the bottom of my neck, and the impact on the top of my head was so hard the disc had exploded, and that bits of disc had cut through my spinal cord. So I've still gone from a 12 millimeter spinal cord, which is a normal sort of width for you or I, and then now I've got 4 millimeters left. So I was very lucky to not be dead in the water, if you like. But I was facing a sort of a big uphill struggle now, and it's been a long journey. I was told I was never going to walk again. I didn't get any movement or sensation back for 5 or 6 days, and then slowly but surely, with a lot of amazing support and a lot of hard work, things started coming back to me. So since then, since I left hospital, I've gone back into I'm still ongoing with my recovery and my rehab. I rehab most days or every day, and that's an ongoing process, as neurological injuries are. And I have to keep that up so I don't regress as well. But I'm so much further down the line than I ever thought I would be, despite still limping around. I've still got underlying medical issues related to spinal cord injuries, so bladder and bowel problems and temperature regulation issues, and all of those things that you don't really see on the surface. People relate those issues, spinal cord injuries and people in wheelchairs, to just movement issues. Actually, your spinal cord controls everything in neurology. So there's a lot more going on, and it's just getting used to those things. But I've been very fortunate. Now I'm in a position to go back into rugby on the media side. So I work as the reporter for Channel 4 on all of the European Cup rugby. I am also one of the presenters for the upcoming Paralympics, although now that is next year, not this year, unfortunately. I've started my own charity. So ironically, given that I'm not very good at walking, and especially not walking up hills, I've got this affinity with mountains, and I've always loved the outdoors. And after about 9 months of my accident, I was doing hours and hours of physio every day. And normally, yourself, you have an injury, you have a long-term injury, but when you're playing rugby, you've got a game, or you're aiming for the next season. You've got a goal in mind and then a target date, and you've got a process you have to go through. And you know that if you do that and you stick to your rehab and you stick to your goals, then you'll make it to the other end. But for me, it was uncertain. It's still uncertain how much I'm going to recover. And so I found that hard. So actually, I deliberately put a target in place for the 12-month mark, something for me to train towards, basically, and rehab towards. And that was to climb Mount Snowdon, which is the highest mountain in Wales. At the time, after 9 months, I hadn't walked more than a few hundred meters out of my wheelchair. So I only had 3 months to try and cover 12 miles and over 1,000 feet. Over 1,000 meters of ascent. So physios thought I was mad, but I was pretty adamant I was going to get up there, and that sort of setting that goal really drove me on and helped my recovery. And eventually I got up there after 9 hours and stood on the top and managed to repay some of the charities that had supported me, and got up there with a group, with a load of people who had been there supporting me on my journey, physios, families. And I stood on top of that mountain and looked out, and it seemed like that culmination of a year of hard work had come to that point. And then after that, I was kind of hooked. So I was off to the Alps pretty quickly after that to climb something 3 times higher, to hobble up something 3 times higher. And then just last year, I was in Nepal climbing the highest trekking peak in the world, and still looking forward, still looking upwards. And the charity that I've started is actually, we raise money to fund people who would benefit from that adventure and that experience. So we'll partner with other charities. So maybe people who are going through mental health issues or physical disabilities, and just in a bit of a junction in their life, like it did for me. going and achieving something you might not think you were capable of, but doing it outside with a group of people, I think can be very inspiring, and hopefully it can be a catalyst for people to set off on a new, a more positive path, or a new path in their life when they might be at a bit of a junction, because it really helped me in that way. So hopefully it can help others. So there you go. Not so short, but that's basically.
Well, I mean, that's the end of the interview. You just answered the next probably 5 questions I had for you. Well, you actually scratched the surface. So if you don't mind, we could expand a little bit more on some of the things you mentioned there. I really want to go into. And the one being, and thank you for sharing all of that, because we did catch up briefly before this, and I asked you if it bothers you, you must have had to relive that story of the injury so many times. I mean, I don't want to say it defines you now, but it was a defining moment in your life. And if you could just give the audience the answer you gave me, does it bother you, and what feelings and emotions does it trigger, does it bring up when you relive that story?
It doesn't really, I can still remember it very vividly. So I can take myself straight back there. And actually, after I got out of hospital, one of the first things I wanted to do was to go and get back in the pool. I've always I was a swimmer as a kid, and I'm actually better on water now than I am on land, so in water than I am on land. So I wanted to get back in the pool to see if there was any of those demons, if you like, that needed dealing with, and there wasn't at all. And I think a large part of that was because I went through a process in hospital of understanding what the accident had given me, and reframing it and restructuring it and looking at the positives from it. And by the time I got to the point of going back to the pool, my situation was already having a positive impact on other people's lives through the blog I'd started, through the people I was talking to. Not to the point that I would have taken it back then. I would have still gone back and changed it at that point, but to the point where I realized, actually, if I buried my head in the sand and never recounted the story, then I wasn't going to be able to help people. So I started seeing the ability to recall the whole day as a positive, one of the positives of the situation. So I have no issues thinking about it. And I don't have any issues telling the story. I've told it 100 times. It comes out different most times, not the actual facts, but I take myself back there, and I do it gladly, because actually you've got to look for the positives in situations like this. And me being able to take myself there and recount that story is one of the positives I can take from this situation, because it can impact other people.
Thank you, buddy. And again, I think that's so valuable when you say that, for the audience as well, going through whatever they're going through right now, being able to draw that parallel, because that was one of the questions I had. What do you think the key factor was to your recovery and accepting the new situation that you found yourself in, which many people are faced with right now with this coronavirus pandemic? Is things have changed, the routines have changed, losing jobs, maybe looking at a career change now because they might not get their job back. So thank you for that. I think we can draw a lot of inspiration from that mindset and the steps that you took. I talk about in my book the key to Sur-thrival and moving forward to thrive, which is clearly what you're doing with what you can. And the first step is acceptance, right? So that's what I wanted to hear from you, is what was it that enabled you to accept? And you're absolutely right. Shying away from the story and not wanting to talk about it is probably not the way to accept the situation. And the fact that you face it and you look for the positives is a testament to who you are as a person and how you're able to keep pushing forward. So thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that. You mentioned there's so much I want to ask you now, especially with the recovery process. But I just want to ask you again, we can bounce around. You mentioned the charity and you raised money let's talk about the mountains. So you decided to climb a mountain. Now, one thing I want to say is it's probably a little difficult. One would expect, you being a rugby player, a former rugby player, that when they hear neck injury, assume that it was on the pitch, like it was for me. It was in a tackle, 3 guys fell on my head, and that was it. I put myself in that kind of danger, as you did with rugby all the time. But it was something that anyone can do. Diving into a pool that's too shallow. Hard for people to relate, especially when I tell people I was playing rugby. It's like, I can't imagine. They can't imagine what it's like, but we can imagine. So I think that's another stark reminder to people that it could happen to you. It could happen to anyone at any moment. And I think it's important then to realize how fragile life is and how it can be. Is that, you seem to be, have you always been this positive as a person? Leading in, has the injury made you more positive, or was it that positivity in your mindset that has been able to get you through the way you've been able to get through?
I've definitely always been a reasonably positive person. I wouldn't have said I've been a negative person, but I'm, if you ask my wife, I'm annoyingly positive now. Like sometimes, I come back, she comes back from work, she just wants to have a whinge. And now I'm that person being like, come on, look at the bigger picture and all this sort of stuff. And it's just this annoying dose.
She can't argue with you, can she? She can't just say, or maybe she does, I don't know.
And don't get me wrong, I still get pissed off about stuff the same way anyone else does. It just doesn't linger for anywhere near as long as it did. I've become a lot better at putting things in perspective because I got given a big dose of it. And I think the thing you touched on about life being fragile or precious is interesting, actually, because you said anyone could dive into a pool. You can imagine doing that. I've dived into thousands of pools. In fact, normally people can remember whacking their nose or something on the bottom of a swimming pool before because they've got it a little bit wrong, and so people have come close. But the thing is, my mum's like, well, surely now you wrap yourself in cotton wool. I couldn't watch you playing rugby for 10 years and now you've broken your neck. Now we can just, wrap yourself in cotton wool and look after yourself. But actually it's had the opposite effect. I'm wobbling along cliff edges in the Himalayas at the moment. And I think it's because I did play rugby for 10 years, but it was diving into a swimming pool on a Sunday afternoon that nearly did me in. So if you go through life, wrapping yourself in cotton wool and protecting yourself, you might just get hit by a bus the next day. Life is fragile, but it's also short. It can also be short. So you need to, for me now, I know I need to make the most of every day because you never know when something like that might happen, and also appreciate what you can do, because a lot of people can't do it. The fact that I can hobble up a mountain, I know is a privilege because I know a lot of people in wheelchairs. I know a lot of people with complete spinal cord injuries who don't have that opportunity. So I don't take things like that for granted anymore. And although it's more difficult for me to do it than it was before, I appreciate it a lot more. So I enjoy it a lot more.
That's wonderful, Ed. Thanks for that. So much in that as well. And again, so much inspiration for people to take from that. I like how when you were talking about your first couple of mountains, you said you climbed and then you corrected yourself and said hobbled. Like I climbed. Actually, no, I hobbled up. Can you talk to us a little bit about your physical limitations right now, where you are with regards to recovery and what you're aspiring to?
So I have something called Brown-Séquard syndrome, which is it affects about 1% of people with spinal cord injuries, and it's usually you usually see them with gunshot or stab wounds because it's where half of your spinal cord is cut quite cleanly, and the level of my injury means that the motor, this is quite complicated now, but the motor nerves run down the same side of your spinal cord. So the motor nerves for the left hand side of my body come down the spinal cord all the way down the left side, but the sensory nerves run down the opposite side. So I've cut my left hand side of my cord, which has cut the motor nerves to my left side, but the sensory nerves to my right side. So that means I have poor motor function in my left side, all the way down through core, leg, foot. I've got foot drop on that side as well, so I can't lift my foot up, which means I have to wear like AFOs, or like orthotics. And on the right side, I've got good function, but no sensation. So I'm a big mismatch, sort of, it's half and half. Technical, I'm a walking quadriplegic, but sort of present as a hemiplegic, so half and half, to get more technical about it. And as I said before, I have quite a few underlying issues that go along with spinal cord injuries, which are expected. You know, bladder issues. Luckily, I don't have to catheterize regularly, and but I do have weakened pelvic floor and all those sort of things. So I've got to be a lot more careful. Sometimes I have to wear bags and stuff. You know, it's just getting used to managing life like that. And I have still suffer from spasticity and spasms, so sleeping can be an issue sometimes. But it's amazing how quickly you get used to your new normal. And at the start, what was such a chore, and actually because I've been way further back for quite a long time, before I didn't even know if I would be walking for quite a long time. I also, even things like the bladder and you know, the temperature regulation, even that slowly improves as well. So you've had to live with it at a certain stage, which means that once you've experienced that, you're not so angry about where you are because you've moved forward. And I think as long as I'm progressing in any way in life, I'm happy. As long as I'm moving forward, it's not like stopping. Because if I stopped and thought about it, when I was fully fit and someone said, right, you're not going to be able to use your left hand for the rest of your life, really. You know, you can use it functionally from there to there, but you'll never be able to open it again properly. You'd be like devastated. You know, you'd be like, really? That you know, that's going to ruin my life. But when you chuck it in amongst all the other stuff and you've got it compared to where you were before, you're like, so what? I've got another one. You know, and that's the way that your perspective shifts and the way you look at these things. And I think touching on the positivity side, I think I was a relatively positive person. I certainly wasn't a negative person before, but perspective gives you positivity. And it's not just about being overly positive about stuff. It's just not being negative about things. You know, you spend more of your life not angry about the little stuff, the stuff you can't affect, the stuff that doesn't really matter, because you automatically, subconsciously weigh it up straight away to the bigger things that might have happened before.
Right. And again, I just want to touch on what you said. You mentioned perspective and how it could have ended up way worse. So if I can relate to that, I have that moment as well where I broke my neck. I was completely paralyzed. And then when I got feeling back, and it's vivid for me too, so I can look back and connect to that. If ever now at the moment I get into autopilot of victim mode or complaining or anything like that, I also feel like I hear this with you recounting your experience, that it could have been a lot worse. I feel like I've been given a second chance, and now I can connect to that to make sure I'm living my best life and doing whatever I can possibly, because it could get taken away. And that's what I hear in your story. The fact that you're climbing bloody mountains tells me that as well, and is inspiration for people that aren't pushing themselves to the limit and growing every single day. I just wanted again to reiterate that and say that I completely resonate with that. Unfortunately for a lot of people, they haven't experienced some devastating loss or trauma or something that has them stare death in the face and be like, all right, well, I got to make the most of my life from now on. And that is the challenge, is inspiring people. You don't want them to go through what we've been through, especially what you've been through, but you also want to use your story to inspire people to see life as the gift that it is right now. So you are doing that, and I commend you for that. And now that leads me to my next question about your charity, M2M. All right, so you've climbed these mountains, you're raising money. I guess a two-part question. So your most recent achievement, which has got a lot of attention, especially mine, and I love that you've done this, is you climbed Mount Everest, or the equivalent to Mount Everest, in your own home on your staircase, hobbled up the stairs for 4 days, 9,000 meters at 8, you'll tell me, nearly 9,000 meters. Incredible. And you raise money in particular for the NHS. So my first question is, why did you choose the NHS as one of the charities to raise money for? And then please expand a little bit more on what M2M does.
So yeah, I mean, like everyone we've been in lockdown, I think, for 4 weeks, and I just come back inside the house in the morning, made a cup of tea, and I was watching the news, and there was a guy called Captain Tom, and I don't know if you might not have heard of him over in the US, but he's a 99-year-old guy who was walking lengths of his garden with his Zimmer frame until he turned 100 to raise money for the NHS. and he's ended up raising 28 million pounds or something. And they've just,
that's incredible.
yeah, so incredible guy. And he turned 100, and the Queen upgraded him from a captain to a colonel, even though he hadn't been in the army since World War II. And it's just been this great story that's kind of unite. It was a nice positive message and a positive thing to break up the news, which was about death tolls and, so I thought, I want to help out if I can as well. The NHS is the National Health Service in England, and they in the UK, and they'd actually started in Wales by a Welsh guy about 50 years ago. But it's kind of the pride and joy over here, and they saved my life 3 years ago. I was resuscitated 3 times in the ambulance, and then the surgeon did a 9-hour operation. He saved my life again, and then the physios ended up getting me back on my feet. So they're obviously going through a tough time at the moment, stretched with their resources, and just try to help out where I can. So I wanted to do something myself rather than cheering on from the sofa. And I always bang on about, there's opportunities in adversity, and, a negative situation is only a negative situation if you decide it is. So I thought it was time to do something. And I knew from this period of lockdown, isolation, that it'd be possible, it would only be a negative situation if nothing positive came out of it. So if I could look back in 6 months' time and go, actually, I managed to do something during that time, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. And obviously, with my weird sort of obsession with mountains, he was walking around his garden, and I thought I need to climb something. And obviously, the stairs was the only thing I could climb in my house, and it was my parents' house, who lived next door. So we've been like isolating with them. Luckily, because I moved back in with them after I left hospital, we've just moved next door because I was still in a wheelchair for quite a while. So I didn't want to ruin my stairs. And I decided to climb the height. Actually, the original plan was to climb the height of Snowdon, which is 1,000 meters, the first mountain I climbed. That would have taken about six or 8 hours. But the way my brain works, an hour later, I was planned to do the height of Everest over 4 days. So four 12-hour shifts it took. And I was camped at the bottom of the stairs as well in my parents' kitchen. And I was hoping to I sort of did it live on social media in the morning and the evening. I was trying to inspire other people to stay fit and healthy, do some exercise whilst they're during lockdown, but also just have a bit of fun. When we turned on the news, Captain Tom was this inspiring story, and obviously it was never going to be anything like that, but we were having a laugh with it. And I was in full mountaineering gear from some of it, camping in my parents' kitchen, all these sorts of things, and just hopefully give people something to smile about during that time. What I originally planned to try and raise £2,000, and we ended up raising £54,000 in the end. So it was amazing, the momentum it got. I mean, it was mind-numbingly boring because, it's normally when you're in the mountains, you can look around at these beautiful views, you've got people to talk to, and I had the same staircase over and over again. And yeah, there was those 2 hours during the day where people were online, and it was great. I had doing some Instagram live stuff, ended up chatting to some amazing people, and having my mates come on and DJ for me whilst I was walking. But there was another 10 hours during that day that it was literally just me walking up and down the staircase. So yeah, it was a proper test of resilience, mentally and physically, because obviously I had to do it all with one leg as well, because of my injury. Ended up leaving blood all over the staircase, and it was a bit of a mess. But I came away with just a few blisters and a dead leg, but having raised £50,000 and put my urges for adventure to one side, or quash those urges for a little while longer anyway.
Congratulations. Incredible, man. I love that story. One thing comes to mind is it the only staircase in the house? How did your parents deal with that, not having a way to get up and down while you were on the stairs, or did they? How did they get around? How did you get around them?
Yeah, I had to make way for them a few times. Yeah, I got caught halfway up and down. I'd meet sort of my mum with a wash basket and things like that. So I mean, they were glad when they were very supportive, but they were glad to get me out of the house, I think, by the time the end of the 4th day. So I removed my tent from the kitchen, they get back into the washing machine and stuff.
You said that we talk again about making something positive, which could be in its perspective, right? We could, again, for the people in lockdown, just like you, just like me, there's a choice. We can choose to look at what we can't do anymore. We can choose to look at what we've lost, what's changed, what we might have been attached to and still attached to, and look at it as a negative situation. But you've taken that, you've seen it as a positive. But I see a key in that, Ed, and that is you've also, your motivations were to help others, right? So it's contributing to something else outside yourself. And once again, for everybody listening and watching, that is great inspiration to motivate them when it comes to growing yourself, turning a negative into a positive, and focusing outward on other people is a great way to do that. And probably what got you through those mundane times you talked about, incredibly and boring. And for a lot of people in their life, they might have similar situations that are tough to get through. But thinking of others, would you say, was a great motivating factor for that?
Yeah, massive. I think it's probably been the biggest thing that has come out of the last 3 years for me. The first time it really hit home was when I was in hospital. I think I'd gone from sort of a proud young bloke and independent, and all of a sudden everyone was having to do everything for me. I couldn't even go to the toilet for myself, and getting bed bathed, and it was hard to deal with. It was hard to get my head around, but just feeling so useless. But after a while, I started. Sorry, one sec. Oh, sorry. I was hearing something weird in my headphone. Yeah, I started the blog, and then I started getting messages back saying, "Look, this is actually really helping me. Your story, your journey. All I was doing was documenting what was going on in hospital, and I wasn't going to make it public to start with. But my wife and my friend found my notes that I was actually recording on an Alexa, just because obviously I couldn't write. And they said, you should make this public. So it might help someone one day just dealing with life in hospital, and spending months on end in hospital is a weird thing in itself. Never mind going through a situation where you don't know if you're ever going to walk again, all those sorts of things. So it's just an interesting mental process. And when I started getting told this is really helping and thank you, that made me feel, that gave me a purpose again, gave me some value. And that was such a powerful feeling. And now, obviously that's snowballed to the point where I've got my own, I've started a charity, and it's almost a new purpose in life. But in a weird way, I do it because it makes me feel good as well. That's the weird thing about a lot of charity. It's a win-win, because it's not a purely selfless act. It's not like, if it made me feel horrendous but was helping people, I might not have ever gone down that path in the first place. But I now would, advise people now, the quickest way, if you're feeling down, the quickest way to make yourself feel better isn't by trying to make yourself feel better. It's go and make someone else feel better. I think as humans, that's built into our DNA. We're sociable creatures. We rely on each other. We rely on community. Back in the day, the cavemen, if you were an outlier, if you weren't adding anything to the others, you'd end up, outside of the tribe, and you'd end up dying because you can't survive by yourself. So I think there's a reward mechanism built into all of us, that when we do positive things that have positive impacts on other people, we feel good ourselves. And I think the more I do that, it's a real purpose in life. And actually, I've said before, I keep getting reminded that charity work doesn't pay the mortgage, but the sort of emotional rewards, the intrinsic rewards, for me, far outweigh the extrinsic value. And I think for me, that's changed. That balance in my head has changed just through the experiences I've had over the last few years.
Wow, incredible, Ed. And I'm sure people are wondering, as I am, you've climbed Everest inside. Is it on the list to do the Everest outside on the real deal?
Yeah, I tried to hide this for quite a while, but I was asked it too many times, even in the build-up after I climbed Mirror Peak, because I know my mum and my wife aren't too impressed with those plans. But they're certainly not imminent. I wouldn't call myself an experienced mountaineer, but I've done enough to know that there is no comparison between climbing your parents' staircase and the real mountain.
Good. I'm glad you realised that.
It's a little bit colder, and it's a lot of the altitude, and you're spending months up there. But I would be lying to if I said that wasn't in the back of my mind. I mean, I stood on top of Mira Peak and looked out, and you could see from the summit of Mira Peak, you could see 7 of the 10 highest mountains in the world, and there Everest was. It's the last one lit up in the evening by the evening sun. It's the first one lit up in the morning at sunrise, and there's a definite allure to it. And I think one day it would be amazing to go up there, but at the same time, I'm not naive enough to know that I've got serious physical limitations, and I wouldn't want to do anything reckless or stupid, and also I wouldn't want to endanger anyone else who was trying to get me up there. So I've got a lot of respect for the mountains, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, that's absolutely fine. There's lots of other hills and mountains to climb in the world, and it's not necessarily the height necessarily isn't the thing. I love climbing with other people, and watching people receive those or feel the sort of power that I felt the first time when I climbed up Snowdon, which is effectively just a big hill in Wales. But that meant just as much to me as climbing up Mira Peak. So it's just where you are in life, and what it means to you is the most important thing.
What an amazing visual that you just created for us with the Himalayas and Everest there lit up. So what's next for M2M is your charity. It stands for Millimeters to Mountains, which I love, especially the significance of that, the millimeters being the millimeters that you wiggled your toe. Am I right in saying that? So then the mountains that you're climbing, literally climbing. What's next for the charity? What's on the list?
So yeah, I mean, obviously Millimeters to the Mountains signifies, as you just said, first flicker of toe, and then now me in the mountains. But it also, it's a metaphor for anyone who's sort of trying to overcome something, starting small and dreaming big, and just taking those first steps and not being too daunted about where the end result is, what the end result might be. And it's just about going through the process and those short-term goals. And for us as a charity, so we originally, it takes a long time to try and get charitable status, and we're pleased to say we've just received it. So the first year we were set up as an events company, if you like, and raising money for other charities, and in particular a spinal unit in Nepal that we're trying to raise money to build over there. Now we have official charity status, and the reason I set it up is because I want other people to experience what I've experienced in the mountains, and people that aren't in a fortunate enough position as I am to be able to go away to the Alps or Nepal. So we want to fund those trips for people who we think it will really benefit. Obviously, everything's on hold at the moment with in the current climate. I was supposed to be going on a fundraising trip to climb Mont Blanc in June, which is the highest mountain in the Alps. But obviously that's been postponed to next year. I am planning, I think what's looking likely is the next fundraising event is the Pennine Way in the UK is the longest footpath in the UK. It's 268 miles from the border of Scotland down to, it links all the national parks down the middle of the country. And it's known as the Spine of England, which is quite, poignant. And so I'm going to do that and raise money for the M2M Foundation to hopefully then run our first trip to the mountains early next year when we partner with another charity. But I'm also going to raise money for a charity called Wings for Life, who funds spinal cord injury research, looking for a cure. So I think hopefully that'll happen at the end of August, and I'm going to encourage as many people as possible, social distancing allowing, to come and join in with me, because I love doing these things with other people, and it's the walking and talking and sharing your stories and that mean the most. And I think everyone's ready to get out of the house and have a good walk around in the countryside as well. They definitely will be by August if we're still in lockdown.
Thank you. I think that'd be a welcome change for people. That sounds brilliant, Ed. Well, listen, as we bring this interview to a close, what I like to do is, there's so much in there already that people can take can take from and inspire them and apply it to their own situation, apply it to their own mindset right now, given the anxiety and stress of the current pandemic. But if we could summarize just for our audience, for people that are going through what they're going through, and maybe I could prompt you with this. You talked about mindset. You talked about that acceptance. What would you say to people right now in order to thrive? What advice could you give them and leave us with in order to navigate this current pandemic the way that you are navigating change in your life right now?
I think in this situation, obviously, we're going through an uncertain time, and I think uncertainty breeds anxiety. So people not knowing where we're going to be in a few months' time, what their job might look like after this all finishes, what the economy, the state of the economy, all these sorts of things. Are they going to catch it or not? All of these sort of things breed anxiety. And I think it's quite a hard thing to do, but I had to do it in hospital, was actually to come to terms with the fact, to come to terms with what you can and can't affect. Because when I was lying in intensive care trying to wiggle my toe, I actually realized that I was spending most of the day just staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I could have done differently to not dive in that end. And it was immobilizing me. I was just lying there, but just feeling terrible about the whole situation. So I quickly realized I had to force myself to just stay present and do what I could that day, forget about where I was going to end up, forget about the past, because I couldn't affect that, and just focus on what I could affect right there and right then to start moving forward. And it was only then that I started making progress. And this situation is very similar in the sense that if you actually write down all the things that you're worrying about, whether it be how long the lockdown's going to last for, how ill you might get if you catch it, if other people might catch it, what, in your case, Donald Trump's going to say tomorrow, all those things you have no effect over. And you realize that actually that's what you're spending most of your time worrying about. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you can park those things, actually there's a useful process is literally writing down all of those things that you're worried about and crossing out the ones that you can't affect. And you'll realize you're not left with a lot else. And then what you realize is what you are left with, which is a lot more time for a lot of us. And it's just trying to make positive changes with that time. So for me, I've been trying to just establish a more useful morning routine, for example. Before, I'd be shooting off to London or something. Now I've got the time to get up, make sure for me, I do all my stretching routine, foam rolling. I get up, I go outside, do some breathing. Then I sit down and do a bit of writing. That morning routine, I'd never had a chance. I'd make up an excuse in my head that I didn't have time to do that. Now we do. And hopefully out the back of this, it'll be so ingrained that I can carry it forward. So, and other things like my foot splint on my left side. So now I don't have to be walking around town or on TV doing the media work. I've said I'm going to spend the whole of isolation without that foot splint on. Now, because I can get around without it, just not very well, not very smoothly, not very easily. But I'm in a position now where I can force myself to try and do it for 6, 7, 8 weeks. And I'm actually now we're 6 weeks in, I'm starting to see some little changes. And I would not have had the opportunity to spend 7 weeks without a foot splint on before, because I've got work to do, I've got places to go. But that's just another way of finding a positive in this potentially negative situation. So it's being able to disengage your emotions from the situation. I suppose people who know anything about Stoicism, it's a lot along those lines, and just looking at it for what it is, and where you can take advantage and take the positives out of it, so that in 6 months' time we're looking back at this and you're saying, you're either that guy saying, God, that was a nightmare, how stressful was that, or you're that person saying, do you know what, that was different, but actually I did this and this, and I've managed to move forward in certain areas. And certain areas we can't move forward with at the moment, but there's certain areas we can, and it's just making sure we understand those and then start actioning things to do it.
Again, brilliant advice. And what I heard in that, if I could simplify it, I was told this one phrase from a rugby coach early in my career, and that is control the controllables. everything you just said there, you could sum up, and you could even, that exercise that you gave, thank you very much, could be that. This is my control the controllables exercise. Write all the things down I'm worrying about, write all the things down. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They're getting anxiety about the situation out there, the politics involved, the conspiracy theories, right? They're jumping down the rabbit hole and really getting carried away with, but what can you control right now? Again, just to ease that anxiety, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So,
And it's fine. It's fine to feel anxious. Like, that's normal. It's about understanding why you're feeling anxious. And as soon as you rationalize it and you understand it, then that anxiety will move away a lot quicker. Don't feel guilty to be worrying. I'm not saying I'm sat here completely happy as Larry the whole time, and someone will be there going, well, that's all right for him. But I feel anxious as well, at times. That's a natural sensation, but it's being able to rationalize it and understanding why you feel that way, and making sense of it all means you can move on a lot quicker.
which is an important aspect of emotional intelligence. It's self-awareness. Only can we use and the understanding of our emotions and our feelings, then can we take the next steps to alleviating those. Again, is what I'm hearing, mate. So it's gold. Everything you've said today is brilliant. Thank you so much, Ed. So to finish off, how can we support you moving forward? How can we create a win-win here?
Well, I suppose you can just keep an eye out for things I'm doing with the M2M Foundation. Obviously, at the moment, it's not a lot, but we'll be announcing, as soon as we understand more about lockdown, we'll be announcing more of our fundraising activities. And just, get in touch if there's anything. Feel free to get in touch through social media. So spend most of my stuff on Instagram, so edjackson8. And feel free to get in touch if anything we've spoken about is poignant, or someone you know has got a spinal cord injury. And I love that interaction, with people. So feel free to drop me a message if there's anything you think that we can chat about.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to have all that information for people to get in touch with you. And Ed, words can't describe how grateful I am, how inspired I feel right now. They've just opened up the hiking trails here in LA, so I think I'm going to go for a hike now. Thanks, buddy. After all of that, I'm feeling very lazy and somewhat inadequate now, listening to all your accomplishments. So, mate, you've inspired me, and no doubt you've inspired everybody listening and watching right now. And thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Ed. Take care, buddy. Be safe. All right. Well, I don't know what to say. That was absolutely amazing, incredible. I knew it would be. No doubt you enjoyed it as well. Thanks for joining us today, and be well and be safe. And we will see you at the next episode. Take care.